Hey everyone, history buffs and fans of extreme machinery. Before you dive into this maelstrom of steel and fire, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dives. And after you read this, I want to hear from you in the comments. What's your take? Was the Sturmtiger a genius weapon or a massive waste of steel? Your opinion matters. All right, let's get into it. Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride. The unbelievable firepower of the Sturmtiger, the colossal monster of World War II. Picture a city in ruins. Dust, smoke, screams. From behind a pile of rubble, something grinds forward, the screech of its tracks piercing the air. This isn't just a tank. It's a floating fortress, the embodiment of engineering insanity and desperation. Its turret isn't the classic dome, but a huge, slab-sided box from which stares the empty muzzle of a monstrous caliber. This is the Sturmtiger, a machine built not for victory, but for terror. A machine that could rewrite the map of an urban battle with a single shot. But why is it so obscure? Why did this colossus never become a legend, remaining instead on the sidelines of history, a terrifying but clumsy cameo in the final act of a great tragedy? Today, we're not just listing dry facts. We're going to get inside its soul, inside that stuffy, gas-and cordite stinking armored can. We're going to understand what those 5 guys who took into battle were thinking. We're going to figure out what this steel monster truly cost the Third Reich, and if there was any economic or military sense to it. This is a story not just about iron. It's a story about the end of an empire that, while drowning, clutched at straws in the form of such wonder weapons. The birth of a monster. Let's travel back to 1943, the Eastern Front. After Stalingrad and the Battle of Kursk, the German command's illusions about a blitzkrieg were shattered. The war had turned into a bloody meat grinder of positional warfare. The Red Army had learned to fight, and its soldiers dug in so well that rooting them out was an incredibly difficult task. Imagine a Soviet fortified area. Concrete pillboxes with walls 3 feet thick. Brick buildings turned into fortresses, narrow streets where every foxhole was a death trap. Standard divisional artillery was useless against this. They needed a sledgehammer. Not just a hammer, but a sledgehammer capable of turning a fortification into rubble with one blow. It was at this moment that the idea of the Sturmtiger was born in the fevered minds of German engineers. The idea was brutally simple. Take the most reliable and powerful chassis Germany had, the legendary Tiger, and mount the largest caliber weapon imaginable for assault. Not a cannon, not a howitzer, but a mortar. But not a standard one, a rocket launcher. Yes, you heard that right. This was a weapon born at the crossroads of classic artillery and rocket technology. Design, the anatomy of insanity. So, the platform, the Tiger. By itself, it was a masterpiece of complex engineering. Powerful, well-armed, with armor that was nearly impervious to most enemy guns at medium range. But it was also finicky, expensive, and unreliable. The Germans took this already imperfect chassis and started making it heavier. First, the armor. The frontal plate of the Sturmtiger's casemate is just an insult to physics and Allied anti-tank doctrine. 150 millimeters of armor steel, sloped at 47 degrees. This is borderline absurd. To put it in perspective, most Soviet tanks and anti-tank guns of the era had calibers from 76 to 100 millimeters. Their shells would just ricochet off this beast. The sides and rear were also heavily armored, up to 80 millimeters. This made the Sturmtiger nearly invulnerable from the front. It was like a medieval knight in full plate armor, but one weighing 66 tons. A standard Tiger weighed only 56 tons. Imagine the strain this put on an already overburdened suspension system. That 10-ton difference was the price for its incredible protection and firepower. And now, the main event. Its heart, its voice, the 380mm rocket launcher. The Raketenwerfer 61. This isn't a barrel in the conventional sense. It's a short, stubby mortar barrel from which it fired not a simple shell, but a rocket-propelled projectile, weighing 350 kilograms. Let's pause on that number. 350 kilograms. That's the weight of a full-grown grizzly bear. And they were launching this grizzly several kilometers. Of those 350 kilograms, 125 were the warhead, packed with TNT. The explosive power was monstrous. Official reports and eyewitness accounts all say the same thing. A direct hit would reduce a multi-story brick building to a pile of rubble, not just blow a hole in a wall. The entire structure would collapse like a house of cards. It could wipe out an entire artillery battery with one round, leaving a crater the size of a swimming pool. But as always, there was a catch. Accuracy. At a range of 5 kilometers, the shell dispersion was around 230 meters. Imagine, you aim at a house, and your shell could land on the next street over. This was an area effect weapon, only effective at short ranges, up to a kilometer or so, in close-quarter city fighting where you could practically point-blank shoot a building. Rate of fire. This is a saga in itself. Reloading this monster took between 10 and 15 minutes. Why? Because the shell weighed 350 kilograms. Inside the fighting compartment, a special crane and winch system with rails was installed to haul this monstrous cucumber into the breach. The process required a Herculean effort from the entire crew and was like some kind of industrial ritual. Imagine, a battle is raging, shells are exploding all around, and you and your 4 comrades, sweating buckets, are heaving this beast into the barrel like dockworkers. The economics of madness. What did one shot cost? Now, let's turn on the cold, economic calculator. What was 1944 like for Germany? It was total war of attrition. A shortage of everything. Steel, non-ferrous metals, fuel, manpower. Industry was working to the breaking point under round-the-clock Allied bombing. Producing a single Tiger was incredibly expensive. Various sources cite figures around 800,000 to 1 million Reichsmarks. For comparison, a Panzer IV cost about 130,000. The Sturmtiger was even more expensive due to the chassis conversion, the fabrication of the massive casemate, and the unique weapon system. But let's think not in money, but in resources. Building one Tiger required around 300,000 man-hours of labor from highly skilled workers. Now imagine spending those hours, that steel, that aluminum, that labor, on creating a machine that, due to its low mobility and rate of fire, could manage at best 5 or 6 shots in an hour of combat. And what about the ammunition? Producing 350 kilogram rocket shells was also no simple task. This isn't stamping out thousands of rounds for an MG-34. These were complex devices with a rocket motor and a huge amount of explosives. 125 kilograms of TNT per shot. That's enough explosive material for dozens of anti-tank mines or thousands of rifle rounds. Did this make any sense? From an economic standpoint, absolutely none. It was a classic example of a Wunderwaffe, a wonder weapon that, in the minds of the Reich's leadership, was supposed to turn the tide of the war by its mere existence. But wars are won not by individual engineering masterpieces, but by thousands of reliable, cheap, reparable machines that could be produced in vast numbers. While Germany was painstakingly building its 18 Sturmtigers, the USSR was churning out thousands of T-34, 85s and IS-2s, and the USA was producing tens of thousands of Shermans. The math of war is merciless. One super tank, even if it destroys 10 enemy vehicles, will ultimately be overwhelmed by sheer mass. The crew, 5 men in a steel trap. And what about the men? Who were these 5 souls who climbed into this steel coffin? The driver. His world, a narrow viewing periscope. No side vision slits. He guided the 66-ton monster through rubble, relying on the commander's instructions and his own intuition. The commander. He was also the gunner. On his shoulders rested finding the target, aiming, and giving the order to fire. And all while constantly swiveling his head, observing the battlefield through his periscopes to avoid being flanked. The radio operator. His place was in the front hall. He was cut off from the rest of the crew, his world the crackle of the radio. The two loaders. The real workhorses. Their day was a cycle of 15-minute bouts of exhausting labor to reload, punctuated by seconds of hellish roar and concussive blast from the firing. Their life in battle was not a romantic charge, but hard, dirty, dangerous work. They sat in a tight, stuffy space, knowing their vehicle was a priority target for all enemy artillery. Yes, they were nearly impossible to kill from the front, but all it took was one hit on a track, and they became a stationary, albeit well-protected, target. And then there was the constant fear of fire. The overstrained Maybach engine, the white-hot breach after firing, all of it in one confined space. Combat record, triumph, or agony. Warsaw, August 1944. This is where the Sturmtiger prototype first spoke. The uprising in the Polish capital was a nasty surprise for the Germans. The city had become a fortress. And then it appeared on the streets. A muffled shot, the whistle of the flying bear, and a few seconds later, apocalypse. An entire building collapsed, burying the defenders of a barricade under the debris. The psychological effect was staggering. Eyewitnesses, like the Polish partisan Andrzej Maxek, recalled it with horror. But it was in Warsaw that all the teething troubles appeared. Shells didn't always explode, especially when hitting soft brickwork. The mechanics were unreliable. The machine broke down more often than it fired. The Ardennes, December 1944. Hitler's last great offensive gamble. The Sturmtigers of the 1000th and 1001st Assault Mortar Companies were supposed to storm Liege, smashing fortified positions. But a gamble remained a gamble. Constant breakdowns, oil thickening in the frost, failed suspensions. These titans got stuck on narrow forest roads, broke down, and were abandoned by their crews, becoming expensive trophies for the advancing Americans. Germany, spring 1945. The finale. The last Sturmtigers were in retreat, covering the withdrawal of their units. They acted as mobile, well-protected pillboxes. But this was no longer a fearsome roar, but a death rattle. The memories of Sergeant Eric Wagner are telling. What remains of the Colossus? Only two examples survive today. One is at the Kubinka Tank Museum in Russia. The other is at the German Tank Museum in Munster. Standing next to it, you feel mixed emotions. On one hand, admiration for the engineering audacity. On the other, an understanding of the project's ultimate pointlessness in those historical conditions. The Sturmtiger was a dead end in the evolution of armored vehicles. It left no direct descendants. Its philosophy, to create a super expensive, super protected carrier for a superweapon, proved unviable. A different philosophy won, embodied in Soviet designs like the Su-152 or the American M12 gun motor carriage. Efficiency, reliability, mass production. So what is the Sturmtiger? A genius weapon? No. A terrible mistake? Not exactly. It is a monument. A monument to the desperation of a doomed regime that, seeing it was losing the war of resources and industry, tried to win it through the genius of a few engineers. It's a symbol of how technological superiority in a single, unique specimen can be drowned by the mass and practicality of the enemy. It makes you think, is the most powerful and complex machine always the best? The story of the Sturmtiger answers, no. The winner is the one who finds the balance between power, cost, simplicity, and quantity. This iron monster with its 350-kilogram voice is an eternal reminder of this simple and brutal truth. That's all, folks. I hope this journey into the world of armor and explosions was as thrilling for you as it was for me. This monster deserves to be remembered. And now, it's your turn. Write in the comments. Do you think if the Sturmtigers had appeared a year or two earlier, they could have changed the course of the war? What seems more effective to you? One of these giants or 10 standard assault guns? Don't be shy, debate, share your thoughts. And of course, if you enjoyed this, subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, and share this with your history-minded friends. It's the best motivation for me to make even more content like this for you. Plenty more interesting stuff is coming. Peace out, everyone.